So fun. Will you pray with me? Ancient holder of promises and young spirit of discovery, accompany my words and our hearing, that they may illuminate our way forward and help us grow toward you. Amen. So one of the things that I have discovered about myself in the last 5 years or so is that, much to my surprise, one of my favorite forms of fiction, of reading, and I love to read, is apocalyptic or future fiction. I find I'm fascinated by stories in which everything we know has changed. The rules of society, the physical world in which we live, the playbook for success, the challenges that people must face and overcome. I find I'm hungry for absorbing other people's ideas about what this looks like, to explore what other ways of living might be possible, to have my imagination about how the world might work turned upside down. Here we are at the last 2 weeks of Epiphany, that season where we are listening for God and God's call to us through what Jesus has to share. And for these final 2 Sundays, we're going to be talking about the Beatitudes, a series of teachings in which Jesus describes to his disciples and all who would listen a new way of being, a new way of living, a series of teachings which turns our imagination about how the world works, how the world might work upside down. So Jesus has been teaching and healing all around Galilee, and he's been drawing larger and larger crowds. And in Luke, up till now, we actually haven't heard much of the content of what he was teaching. It says he was teaching. This collection of speech that we call the Beatitudes, it lasts for almost 30 verses. And it's the first time we hear in depth what Jesus has been saying in all of these teachings. So probably one long speech is not the way his words were originally shared. Likely various stories existed in snippets as only oral teachings for a generation, preserved by their retelling over meals and around campfires. And the people who compiled the Gospel of Luke put them into one speech, one long cluster of teachings. But these were the words that the early followers thought were important enough to keep retelling and eventually to include in the recorded version for us to read today. This collection of sayings was the story that his followers thought we should hear to help us step into the new reality that Jesus was calling his disciples to. A new reality that Jesus calls the reign of God. People have understood the reign of God or the kingdom of heaven. I like to call it the kingdom of heaven, 2 terms that I use interchangeably to mean lots of things. Many have understood the Beatitudes to be a prescription of sorts of how we're supposed to live our lives. Being rich is bad, being poor is good, an ethics lesson. Others have understood the Beatitudes as a notion of heaven, some description of what we will receive in the hereafter, a formula used to calculate what we'll receive when we die. And for many, these teachings have been a reason to berate ourselves, or perhaps as a prescription for how to enter a magical land that exists after this lifetime. But I understand that Jesus came to us to beckon those who would follow him to a new way of living, a new path for life. I understand the Beatitudes to be Jesus' effort at trying to help his disciples understand this new reality he's trying to draw them toward. This new understanding not of life after death, but life. And that reality is so drastically different than life as it currently exists that Jesus uses these very dramatic terms that are completely counterintuitive to his disciples and to us. He's trying to get their and our attention. He's trying to help us understand this new reality where everything we understand about how the world works is upside down. So he uses this language that's almost better understood as poetry. Poetry that helps us access a new understanding, helps us grasp the vision he wants us to see, to help us dream an impossible dream. It's like a poetic version of the fiction I so love to read, an invitation to step into a new world with Jesus, to step into God's reign. I understand the reign of God or kingdom of heaven to be a place of imagination and play and delight. It's a place where the able-bodied are no more valued than the disabled. A place where after harm has occurred, restoration instead of retribution takes place. It's a place where beauty and rest are valued and protected. A place where the balance of the earth is in harmony, where humans are a part of the ecosystem rather than its major source of injury. A place where no one grieves or struggles alone, but is surrounded by community healing. A place where joy and laughter are prized, and hoarding and isolation are no longer. It's a place that is possible to create here on earth, if only we have the imagination and the courage and the vision to build it. And it's a place that we can occasionally catch glimpses of now and then, if we are lucky and paying attention. When we are able to hear the wind blowing through the trees and feel at one with the land on which we live. When we renew a relationship with an old friend or family member that has been broken and our heart is filled with the joy of connection. When we spend the day cooking for folks and go to sleep with a satisfaction of knowing that hungry bellies were fed. When we come together as a church for annual meetings, or work together through changes in our Constitution that returns land to its first keepers. These are glimpses of the reign of God. The Beatitudes offer challenge and offer vision. May we ever be inspired to heed their call to building a world into which all are invited, toward creating and dwelling in the reign of God. Amen.